Welcome back to MVM. Today we're going to take a look at the upcoming game Lumeria, War of the Gods from Cube Factory of Ideas. If you couldn't grasp it from the title of the game, this is a conflict-driven war game that's played 1v1, at least for the version of the game that I have. Whether there will be other play modes introduced in the future is completely unknown. This game is definitely expandable to the point where you can have different maps. In fact, there's already 2 different maps you can play on, and the sky's the limit to what they can introduce. But for what I have here, which is a prototype of the master set, it is a 1v1 game. Now, I have 4 factions that I was given to play with for this prototype. Each faction represents one of those gods. I'm using Apollo here in front of me, and I'm battling against Mars. But there are other gods included in this box, and there are still more gods that will be included with the upcoming crowdfunding campaign. Not to mention that, they've already teased a few expansions, meaning there will be other factions and other gods that you can bring into play. And all of these gods can be battled against each other in different combinations. Now, each one of these gods is going to bring with them an army. An army is made up of these cards. And this game does not use miniatures like you might expect from any kind of tactical game. You're actually placing these cards directly on the battlefield. Each one of these cards is going to take up a square. And if you see the board in front of me, you'll see that the map I'm using is divided into these squares with a few different terrain features, some camps that are back here on the bottom line, and this recovery track along the side, which is very important and something that I want to focus on as I talk about this game. But in addition to your army, you're going to start with your actual god. Like I said, this here is Apollo. He comes with all of his own special abilities, and he comes with his own deployment track, which is on the back. So at the start of the game, after you choose your faction, you're going to have a few armies deployed out on the battlefield to start with. Now, this is a scenario-driven game, meaning you're going to choose a scenario every time you play. The scenario that I was given to play was called 3 Hills, and you're going to see 3 hills on the board. Now, keep in mind that you're not seeing the whole board. I wanted to show you kind of a zoomed in look at what your side of the board looks like. Your opponent is going to have a side of the board that is almost identical. Their troop layout is going to be a little different because that's all based on the god themselves. But for this particular scenario, we're fighting over those 3 hills. You're going to want to have one of your characters in that hill at the end of the round. If you do, you're going to collect one of the scenario victory point tokens, which are set off to the side. These tokens can represent anything. They might serve as victory points. They might serve as markers that are out on the board. You'll collect them in whatever ways. For this particular scenario, you're only collecting them if you end your turn controlling one of those hills. Now, you're also going to see a few other things in addition to those tokens. The gold pieces, which you're going to collect and use to spend. You've got some damage tokens, and you've got some dice that you're going to roll and some dice that you're going to place. The D6 dice are the attack dice. Whenever you make an attack in this game, you're rolling those dice. You're looking for successes on 4s, 5s, and 6s. Of course, these dice can be mitigated in a variety of ways. You can use your character's abilities, or there's some things you can actually do on the board as far as action goes. And then you're going to have your 3 activation dice. Now, these are dice that are never rolled. They simply have 3 faces: a blank face, a plus face, and a minus face. And this is one of the aspects of die mitigation. If you can entrench your units, they get a plus symbol, making their defense a little higher. If they become exhausted, like for example from running or from other elements, then you place a minus on them, and they're going to be easier to hit. They're going to have a subtraction to their defense, so they'll be easier to hit by the opponent. So you need to keep those things in mind. You also only have 3 of these activation dice, meaning on your turn you can only activate 3 units. So let's actually talk about what a turn looks like, because that's the unique thing about this game that makes it a little bit different than the other tactical card games that are out there, because you're going to get a variety of things to do on your turn. You're going to have 4 kind of special actions, and these 4 actions are represented by these 4 slots on your player board. You've got 3 standard actions that everyone has, which is to move, which is to volley, and which is fortune, which is going to allow you to reroll some dice. And then everybody has their special god power as well that's labeled here. So you're going to be able to use these. There's a caveat to that. Each one of those slots is going to be taken up by a little token. When you use that ability, that token is going to come off of the board and go here onto this recovery track starting on the 0 space. You cannot use that ability again until this token has slid all the way down to the 4 space, in which case you'll get it back on your player board. If you use more than one maneuver or your god ability, these other tokens are just going to sit and wait. You can only ever be working on one token at a time. So as soon as this token comes off the board, it's going to come back onto your player board in one of the empty slots, and the new token is going to come in and it's going to start its recovery process. But what's really neat is that this recovery process is sped up every time you miss an attack. So in a lot of these games, if you miss, it's just awful. It can ruin your entire plan. But what I like in Lumeria is that your misses do something for you. You're getting these tokens back faster. So you really want to attack even if you don't think you have a chance. You still want to roll those dice, because even if you're missing 4 times, then you're getting that token back right away. So you're kind of driven to keep attacking. You don't want to just sit and be defensive, because if you're just defensive, you're never going to get these tokens back. And then there's a limit to what you can take, because these actions are very powerful. Of course, moving is super important. That's how you're actually going to move your cards along the battlefield. You'll notice that each card has a specific move value, so you're going to want to move those around. So that's really important. You're also going to want to use your volleys, because those allow you to take surprise attacks, which are kind of ranged attacks from each of your units. You're also going to see that some units have ranged attacks and some have melee. So those are some special differences between these types of units. While we're talking about units, of course, you're also going to have a health value. So when you are attacking, when you do roll those dice and get successes, you're doing damage to units that you'll place on there with these little tokens. If a unit ever has its health value worth of damage, it's dead, it's removed from the game. Luckily, you have a whole row of reinforcements that can be summoned during the game. Of course, these reinforcements all cost gold. You don't pay for those units that you started with, but if you want to recruit other units during the recruitment phase, you have to pay the gold that's listed on the card. You're going to get 2 every turn in what is an income step, but you need to decide if you want to spend this to summon some of your smaller units or if you want to save it up for some of your larger units, because each faction has 2 big units that are going to cost 4 gold apiece. So you're going to want to save up a couple turns, which means you're not replenishing your troops. Recruitment and actions are very interesting because you're going to be going back and forth across the table. The first player is going to get to decide if they recruit something, then the other player is going to recruit, and back and forth. You don't do it simultaneously. You get to wait and see what your opponent does, and you get to react to it. The same goes for your maneuvers. You get to see if your opponent moves before you have to decide to move. You see if your opponent volleys before you decide to volley. So you always have this back and forth element happening, and the same thing is true of activations. When it comes time to actually activate your units and use their abilities, that's when you're going to place these dice out and show that this unit has been activated. Every unit has their own special ability, and this can also help them attack or do damage and things like that. So again, this is also back and forth with each player taking an action in turn order. So you're going to get a chance to kind of see what everyone is doing and reacting to it before you take your own turn. Now, of course, the scenario that we're talking about here is all about controlling these hills. So you're motivated maybe a little more than normal to kind of push these enemies off the hill. So you're going to want to look for abilities maybe that can push. Some melee abilities have pushback, which is going to push your enemies. When you fight them, you could even corner them. There's a lot of cool tactics that you can see spread out here amongst these different cards, and each one of these plays very differently. These units are kind of meant to work together. For example, I'm Apollo, who's the Greek, so you have the Peltasts and the Hoplites, and my big guy is Cerberus, who can come out, which is pretty cool. There's some kind of obviously mythological element to this because you're going to be playing all of these cool factions with all of these really cool influences. So that is kind of an overview of Lumeria. Like I said, the game is going to continue on back and forth. You're going to go through these phases, taking your actions, fighting, doing damage, until somebody triggers that scenario end condition. For me, it's getting 10 points here for this scenario. So you want to have these units controlling these hills, up to 10 times. So the game can be pretty quick, or it can go on. It's all player controlled based on how well you do in your strategies. So personally, I'm pretty excited to see what the new factions are going to be. I'm also pretty excited to see what the new game modes are. I already know there's a second board. I only have this one, but there's another one I've seen that looks very cool, and I'm really excited about the possibility maybe of 4-player games that are just massive games where you're moving units all around, or even team games where you're teaming up against other opponents. I think would be really cool. But we'll all have to take a look at the crowdfunding page because I don't have any inside information there. I'll be following the page when it launches. You can find the link down below when the page is live. So take a look at the campaign. Let me know in the comments below which faction you're most excited about that's present, and maybe which factions you'd want to see. I know they've teased some Chinese gods coming and being available in the future as well, which is pretty cool. Some Aztec ones, and I've got Thor off to the side. I have not used Thor yet, but he is calling my name. I think my next battle is going to be Thor. So thank you so much for taking a look at this game with me today. And as always, thank you for liking, subscribing, and following us here at MVM. And until I see you again, just have fun at the table.
Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.